all year round.
It's so mysterious.
This is who we are.
This is who we are. WAVR.
News, talk, music, get it all
24 hours
on West Africa Democracy Radio 94.9 FM Dakar.
WADR, promoting dialogue.
It's 6 p.m. in Dakar and Bamako. Good evening and thank you for staying tuned to West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting on 94.9 FM and worldwide at wadr.org. Welcome to Newslink. First, our headline stories. Senegal's opposition parliamentary group rejects a newly amended electoral code over legal consequences.
All the provisions of this law point to one single individual. What makes it especially dangerous is that it is retroactive.
Malian Transitional President Assimi Goïta as source of security reinforcement against any attempt at destabilization.
No violence, no intimidation, and no desperate attempts at destabilization will reverse the course of our country.
A Gambian Navy rescues more than 100 migrants stranded at sea for nearly 2 weeks. And President Tinubu gets approval from House of Representatives for a $518 million loan. Please stay tuned for details of these stories and more.
On the news, this is Sankulu Jibril Janko.
Many thanks for joining our broadcast this evening. News edition of Newslink begins in the Sahel region, where countries of the AES are responding by means of security reinforcement. On Tuesday, Burkina Faso announced the launch of a nationwide operation called Wadr. The initiative aims to strengthen public vigilance and reinforce internal security in response to terrorist threats. The security boost comes as neighboring Mali, with which Burkina Faso shares a confederation, recently faced simultaneous attacks. Abdullah Hassan reports.
In a statement on Tuesday, he praised citizens for their role in community vigilance, saying the new initiative, Wadr, is part of the government's broader strategy to combat insecurity. Mahamadou Sana is calling on citizens to report any suspicious behavior to the authorities. Indicators mentioned include unusual bulk purchases of food, acquisition of hazardous materials or items that could be used to make explosives, and the sudden occupation of homes by individuals avoiding contact with neighbors. The ministry's statement also lists other warning signs, such as refusal by some individuals to comply with hotel registration procedures and suspicious movements near strategic infrastructure, including military barracks, airports, and administrative buildings. For the Burkinabe security minister, effective security depends on a holistic approach based on cooperation between defense forces and civilian populations. The launch of Wadr comes amidst tightened security measures nationwide following last weekend's coordinated attacks in Mali, a fellow member of the Alliance of Sahel States, AES.
Abdullah Hassan await that report. Meanwhile, the Malian Transitional Authority has reassured citizens of protection against any attacks by armed groups operating in the country. Colonel Assimi Goïta gave the assurance during his first media appearance days after the April 25 coordinated attacks by JNM fighters in several cities, including the capital, Bamako. The army chief denounced what he labeled as an attempt to destabilize the country. Goïta's speech followed his visit to the wounded and to families of fallen soldiers, including that of Defense Minister Sadio Kamara.
These attacks are not isolated incidents. They are part of a broader destabilization plan designed and carried out by armed terrorist groups, supported by internal and external sponsors who provide them with intelligence and logistical resources. No violence, no intimidation, and no desperate attempts at destabilization will reverse the course of our country. Security measures have been strengthened. The situation is under control, and clearance operations, intelligence gathering, and stabilization efforts are ongoing.
Transitional President Colonel Assimi Goita.
Stories coming up on West Africa Democracy Radio. Newslink continues.
Well, here in Senegal, the adopted bill by the National Assembly amending Articles L29 and L30 of the Electoral Code has sparked criticism from a section of the political class. Under the amended rule, instead of removing someone from the voter register permanently, they will now be banned only for a limited period. The changes mainly concern eligibility rules linked to criminal convictions. For the opposition camp, the law is tailor-made and has vowed to challenge it before the Constitutional Council. Here is Imo Edet with more.
Out of 165 members of parliament, 140 took part in the vote, including 21 by proxy. The bill passed by a wide margin of 128 in favor, 11 against and 2 abstentions. PASTEF, the ruling majority, says the reform is necessary, with Interior Minister Mohamedou Bamba Cissé arguing it corrects provisions seen as discriminatory.
For me, it was an unjust law. I fully support the current parliament's position in seeing this as a reform that can help open up the democratic space. A country must be able to move forward. That's essential. In my view, this is not a personal law targeting an individual. You cannot deprive thousands or millions of people of a choice they believe in. That's what is dangerous in a republic.
But the opposition is pushing back. Aissata Tal Sao, leader of the Taku Walu parliamentary group, has described the law as tailored to serve specific interests.
All the provisions of this law point to one single individual. What makes it especially dangerous is that it is retroactive. Retroactivity is a very specific and exceptional legal measure. When Parliament invokes it, it is usually required to clearly justify why. But in this case, no real justification is given, other than what appears to be an attempt to erase convictions that had already become final.
She says her party will challenge the reform before the Constitutional Council without specifying the date. Civil society groups had also raised concerns ahead of the vote, criticizing what they called a lack of inclusiveness in the process.
Imo Edet reporting. In Guinea, a major opposition political party and a key challenger in the last presidential election has announced its full withdrawal from the ongoing electoral process. In a statement issued after its extraordinary meeting, the Democratic Front of Guinea cited serious irregularities, pointing to repeated violations of the electoral code. Led by Abdoulaye Yero Balde, Frontec describes the existing electoral structure as supporting the ruling camp. Augustine Coley tells us more.
The Democratic Front of Guinea announced its withdrawal from the electoral process just weeks away from the May 31 legislative and municipal elections. The party, led by Abdoulaye Yero Balde, cites what it calls serious and persistent violations of the Electoral Code, arguing that conditions for a free, fair and transparent vote are no longer in place. Frontec points to what it describes as a lack of neutrality by electoral authorities, the selective rejection of certain candidates, and the silence of regulatory bodies despite multiple appeals. The party says these irregularities suggest a broader effort to influence the outcome of the May 31 twin elections. As a result, it has withdrawn all its candidates, agents, and representatives from the process and says it will not take responsibility for the consequences of the election under current conditions. Frontec has also warned it will contest the credibility and legitimacy of the results in advance. However, the party insists this is not a withdrawal from political engagement, but a stand in defense of democratic principles. Electoral authorities have yet to respond.
A report by WDR's Conakry correspondent Cherno Alpha Ibrahim Balde, voiced by Augustine Coley. In Nigeria, the Ministry of Health and Social Welfare has inaugurated the Southern Nigeria Traditional Rulers Council Primary Health Care Committee in Abuja. The move is aimed at strengthening grassroots health delivery by leveraging the influence of traditional institutions. Correspondent Yechen Sasetu has the details.
Gathered in the hall were heads of traditional institutions from Edo, Anambra, Delta, Abia, and other southern states. Minister of Health and Social Welfare Muhammad Ali Pate said traditional rulers have a critical role to play beyond cultural preservation. He urged them to work closely with state and zonal health authorities to promote primary health care, maternal health, and immunization.
I urge all of you to embrace this responsibility that we have put before you, commitment with passion and a shared vision for a healthier, peaceful Nigeria.
Executive Director of the National Primary Healthcare Development Agency, Muyi Aina, said the initiative will help tackle misinformation and build trust around vaccination, especially in rural communities.
Cannot make significant progress if you are not fully on board. And even as MPHCDA is focused on delivering accessible, equitable, and affordable basic healthcare services that is also high quality to our citizens, you all, our royal fathers, will continue to be our critical partners.
Chairman of the Southern Traditional Rulers Council and the Oni of Ife, Eniton Ogunwusi, commended the initiative, noting that the Southern Council can draw lessons from their northern counterparts established over a decade ago.
And I'm very happy we have our brother from Yobe State, just basically for peer review mechanism. So we want to thank you for joining us. It is one Nigeria, and we thank you so very much. And we have a lot to learn from you.
Meanwhile, concerns were raised over climate differences, funding, and local government administration. However, Head of Mission, Center for Wellbeing and Integrated Nutrition Solutions, CWINS, Mahmoud Zubeiru, assured that adequate structures are in place to support effective funding and implementation. The committee is expected to strengthen collaboration between traditional institutions and the health sector to improve outcomes at the community level. For WADR, Yechinu Sasitu in Abuja.
Ghana has declined to sign a proposed health partnership with the United States, citing concerns over provisions that require access to sensitive national health data. The decision comes as Washington pushes a new global health strategy already been adopted by several African countries, while others resist over sovereignty and conditionalities. Well, from Accra, Nadia Tete reports.
Sources familiar with the negotiations say talks began late last year and were initially routine, but became increasingly tense as Washington pushed for stricter conditions, including access to sensitive health data. Ghana ultimately declined to sign before an April 24 deadline, citing concerns over those provisions. The deal was expected to provide about $109 million in health support over 5 years, although details of Ghana's financial contribution remain unclear. Authorities in Accra have since communicated their position to the United States. Ghana's decision reflects a broader divide across Africa. Countries like Zimbabwe and Zambia have also rejected similar agreements over concerns about sovereignty and attached conditions. However, several others have signed onto the U.S. initiative, including Nigeria, Rwanda, Uganda, Cameroon, Liberia, and Cote d'Ivoire. Kenya has also signed a major deal, although its implementation is currently facing legal challenges. The differing responses highlight an ongoing debate over balancing critical health funding with national control over data and decision-making. The U.S. State Department maintains it does not disclose details of bilateral negotiations, but says it remains committed to strengthening partnerships. The proposed agreements fall under Washington's America First Global Health Strategy, which encourages countries to take greater responsibility in tackling diseases such as HIV/AIDS, malaria, tuberculosis, and polio, with a long-term goal of reducing dependence on foreign aid. Despite the setback, the United States remains a key development partner to Ghana, providing over $200 million in assistance in 2024, including significant support for health programs. For WADR, Nadia Tete, Accra.
You're listening to Newslink here on West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting on 94.9 FM, online at wadr.org, and across the social media platforms at WADR English. Here is a reminder of our top stories. Senegal's opposition parliamentary group rejects a newly amended electoral code over legal consequences. Malian transitional president Assimi Goïta as source of security reinforcement against any attempt at destabilization. And Gambian Navy rescues more than 100 migrants stranded at sea for nearly 2 weeks. We also have a guest interview and sports news. Please stay with us.
Fresh and breaking news all the time. Hear it first as the news breaks, only on West Africa Democracy Radio. Newslink continues.
Liberia's Vice President Jeremiah Kun says the government will soon enforce the liberalization policy more strictly, warning that the foreign-owned businesses in restricted sectors could face sanctions. Kung accuses some foreign firms, including those linked to the world's preferred soda drink, of dominating supply chains meant for Liberians. He described the situation as troubling while noting the political sensitivity of confronting investors he personally knows from the private sector. WDI's Monrovia correspondent Abraham Packer reports.
Long-standing concerns are resurfacing over the enforcement of the country's Liberianization policy, which reserves certain sectors such as a petty trading, small-scale distribution, and retail for Liberian citizens. Local business owners say these protections have been increasingly undermined, with some foreign nationals allegedly gaining control through lobbying or informal partnerships. To address the issue, Vice President Jeremiah Kun says the government will tackle enforcement in collaboration with the business registry, tax authorities, immigration services, and trade associations.
Indians and Lebanese, most of the factory, they should not be opening store in Liberia. And that's why most Liberians who want to do business, it's difficult to enter the market. They don't even know how to enter the market. And that's why we have to break it now.
However, traders argued that the enforcement has remained weak for years, allowing expatriate groups from the Middle East and Asia to dominate sectors meant for locals. Responding, the Vice President insists that stronger implementation could create over 10,000 additional jobs for Liberians and attract more diaspora investment.
We need a political will, which the President has given, and that's why I'm leading the charge.
Authorities say a 30-day compliance window will be part of any negotiations with affected businesses. For Newslink on WADR, Abraham Parker, Monrovia.
In the Gambia, a naval patrol unit has rescued a group of irregular migrants stranded on an island in Bonyadu in the North Bank region of the Gambia. The armed forces say around 120 people were left for nearly 2 weeks without food or clean drinking water before the operation was launched on a Sunday evening. According to officials, a naval team was swiftly dispatched to the area to carry out rescue following an alert. From Banjul, Sangdon Almeida reports.
According to the Navy patrol team, it successfully reached the stranded individuals and evacuated them to safety, preventing further risks to their lives. They were taken to the Naval Command in Banjul for formal processing and subsequent handover to the relevant authorities. Following the operation, citizens have shared mixed reactions.
How best is the government helping the youths? How are they creating job opportunities to make sure that the youth stay in the country?
These people are actually in the water. That was so embarrassing.
Less than 24 hours after the Gambian Navy announced the rescue of 120 would-be migrants in the North Bank region, the Gambia Immigration Department's Border Patrol Unit on Monday intercepted 60 suspected irregular migrants at Tanje, a fishing community in the Kombo South. The group, comprising 10 Gambians, 47 Senegalese, 2 Guineans, and 1 Ivorian, were found hiding along the coastline. Mustafa Sonko, a specialist in migration issues, weighs in on why irregular migration continues.
The smugglers they change their route because securities have been beefed within the Gambia. But this also increase risk for migration, including abandonment and lack of basic survival needs, traditional route, and the emergence of more informal, less accountable smuggling arrangements.
According to migration data, nearly 900 Gambians lost their lives attempting to migrate in 2025. The vast majority, 840, died at sea, while an additional 53 deaths were recorded on land, highlighting the continued dangers of irregular migration. For Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio, Sangdana Mendy, reporting from Banjul.
Politics, analysis on major news, social matters, and all. This is A Guest.
Our guest interview is focused on the adopted electoral bill by Senegal's National Assembly. These are Articles L29 and L30. The changes mainly concern conditions of ineligibility linked to criminal convictions. Well, under the new provision, the principle of permanent removal from the electoral register is replaced by time-limited ineligibility. The opposition has denounced the law as tailor-made and says it will challenge it before the Constitutional Council. What exactly changes with this new law? Well, Theodore Montiel is a former Senegalese National Assembly member.
En fait, si on compare l'article L29 ancien.
If we compare the old article L29 in the 2021 code, it listed several crimes and offences that, if someone was convicted of any of them, immediately and permanently prevented that person from registering on the electoral roll. This is what is referred to as civil death. Today, the new article L29 still lists several crimes and offences. Indeed, I think some have even been added, such as drug trafficking and migrant smuggling. But this major difference is that the ban on registration is no longer permanent. It is now time limited. The law states that after serving your sentence, you cannot register on the electoral roll for 5 years. Once those 5 years have passed, you are allowed to register again. Article L30, which previously listed less serious offences and imposed a 5-year ban on registration, has simply been repealed.
The majority defends this as a necessary revision, while the opposition calls it a tailor-made law. As a former parliamentarian, what is your view?
Bon, loi taille sur mesure, révision nécessaire. La révision est nécessaire.
Whether it is a tailor-made law or a necessary revision, the revision itself was needed. However, in all electoral code reviews between 1992 and today, consensus was always prioritized before any changes were made. The electoral code is essentially the rule book governing political actors and elections, so it should be agreed upon by all stakeholders. That was not the case here. What people are criticizing is the lack of consultation. This represents a break from established through unwritten tradition. Previously, whenever the electoral code needed revision, stakeholders would sit down and discuss it. This time, a group of MPs took it upon themselves to change the rules without involving other parties. That is what is being denounced. Secondly, what makes this new provision problematic is that the legislator violated a fundamental legal principle that laws should not be retroactive. By introducing Article 2, they allowed individuals who had already been convicted in the past to benefit from the new provisions. In doing so, they made the law retroactive. While lawmakers technically have broad powers, in a republic, certain principles should not be violated, because once a person does it, it sets a precedent for others to do the same.
Ça augure que demain, quelqu'un d'autre pourrait faire la même chose.
So should we now expect that criminals could take part in elections in Senegal?
Bon, ce n'est pas quelque chose.
That possibility cannot be ruled out. A person who commits a crime is tried, convicted, and serves their sentence. After that, they are considered to have repaid their debt to society. Originally, when Article L29 and L30 were introduced, the legislator emphasized ethical considerations, arguing that those who led a country should be beyond suspicion and uphold certain values. That is why convicted individuals were were banned from participating in elections. However, what is important here is that this concerns registration on the electoral roll, not eligibility. Eligibility is determined by the Constitutional Council based on criteria such as having a clean criminal record. So, a person may be registered to vote but still be ineligible to run for office if they do not meet those requirements.
The opposition has announced it will challenge the law before the Constitutional Council. What are the chances of success in this case?
It is possible that the 7 judges could strike down the law. As I mentioned, there is a legal principle that laws should not be retroactive. Constitutional law experts and private law specialists will confirm this. Including retroactivity directly in the law could lead the council to reject it. That said, I cannot predict their decision, as it will depend on the legal basis they use. But there is certainly a possibility. The referral to the Constitutional Council is also motivated by the unilateral nature of the process. The Council will ultimately rule on the substance of the law and sometimes on procedural aspects as well.
Merci beaucoup.
Theodore Montel is a former Senegalese National Assembly member. Well, in sports, FIFA has announced that the International Football Association Board has unanimously approved strict new disciplinary rules targeting discriminatory behavior and on-field practice. Under the changes, any player who covers their mouth to hide abusive or discriminatory language will be sent off immediately. Automatic red cards will also apply to players who walk off the pitch in practice and to team officials who encourage match abandonment. FIFA says all 48 teams heading to the 2026 World Cup will be briefed on the new rules soon. The move follows recent controversies, including a practice walk-off by Senegal players in the Africa Cup of Nations final and racism allegations involving Vinicius Jr. of Brazil and Real Madrid during a Champions League match. Football lawmakers say the new measures are aimed at removing ambiguity and enforce zero tolerance for discrimination and misconduct. In the UEFA Champions League, Paris Saint-Germain PSG edged Bayern Munich 5-4 in a dramatic UEFA Champions League semi-final first leg in Paris, France. The match set a record for the highest scoring semi-final in competition history, 9 goals, with both sides trading in a frantic encounter. Well, PSG led 3-2 at half-time before pulling clear to 5-2. But Bayern Munich fought back, led with 2 goals to keep the tie alive. The second leg takes place on May 6 in Munich, with a place in the final in Budapest still up for grabs. Well, we've come to the end of this edition of Newslink on West African Democracy Radio, broadcasting from Senegal, Dakar, Senegal. Thank you for listening, and many thanks to Mustafa Sek and Mauda Diouf for the technical assistance. Do interact with us via social media platforms, X, Instagram, and Facebook at WADR English. I am Sankula Jibril Janko. Good evening.
We thank you for listening to Newslink in Nigeria on Love FM Abuja and Darling FM Owerri. In the Gambia on Hot FM Banjul, Hilltop FM and Veritas Radio in Serekunda. Thank you for listening on Alternative Youth Radio Lofa County, Liberia, Radio Kegaman in Nimba County, and DCN Radio Riverses County. A big thank you to Radio Graft FM in Sierra Leone for listening, and in Ghana we thank Radio Pad in Damango and Royals FM in Wenchi. Thank you all for listening to Newslink.